What is up guys, Broken Ronin here, and in this video I'll be talking about another Jujutsu Kaisen matchup. Gojo Satoru, the user of the 6 Eyes and Limitless technique, versus one of the most underrated and underappreciated special grades in the series, Jogo.
Krakatawa!
Now we know that Gojo in his prime could beat Jogo, seeing as how we saw that fight in the anime, but how would Jogo fare against Gojo before he awakened and became a sorcerer who was renowned as the Honored One? In this video I'll be going over both of these characters' feats, statements, and general lore in order to determine who would win this battle. This is a versus battle that has been recommended to me in several places, but the most recent one was on my Twitch, where chat asked me my thoughts on these characters going at it, and I decided that there is no better way to answer the question than with the video. To start off, let's dive right into the scaling of Gojo Satoru, the character who altered the world of Jujutsu Kaisen with his mere birth. Just like I do in all of my Jujutsu Kaisen versus battles, the first thing I'm going to scale are Gojo's physical abilities, things like his speed, durability, and attack potency. Now, Gojo isn't necessarily the most physical fighter in the verse at this point, and due to this, lacks an abundance of strength or speed feats. Because of narrative implications, however, we are able to get a general idea of where he should scale. For one, Gojo should probably just scale to Teen Ghetto speed-wise, considering the fact that they are portrayed to be rivals within this era. Now, I'd personally argue that due to Toji finding it appropriate to prep for Gojo and not Ghetto, that would imply that Gojo is just a more dangerous opponent all around, rather than them being true equals as Gojo implies. Either way, you should be able to confidently say that he can move, perceive, and react at least as fast as Ghetto can. And depending on your interpretation of this feat, you might be able to argue that Ghetto was able to deploy an attack fast enough to catch Toji off guard. However, it's a bit more consistently shown that when Toji is taking it seriously, he can blitz Ghetto, and even Gojo struggles to perceive his movements. Gojo does demonstrate the ability to activate blue in response to a blitz attempt from Toji, and you can certainly use this as an indication of the level of speed he can combat even when fatigued, and this would simply mean that a hypothetical full power Gojo in this instance would most likely demonstrate even better speed feats, so I'm fine with saying that this Gojo can react to Toji pretty consistently even if it is difficult. What further supports the notion of Gojo being more relative to Toji in this fight than he led on is the fact that when asked whether or not he can beat Gojo in a more fair fight, Toji implies that even he doesn't know how the fight would go, which seems to imply that when not fatigued, Teen Gojo is a rival for Toji with all of his equipment. Unfortunately, you can't come to as great of a conclusion when it comes to Gojo's strength and durability. You see, due to Gojo's main form of defense being Infinity, in this arc he doesn't really show any durability feats. Anytime Gojo is hit by Toji, he takes serious damage with no sign of physical resistance. Toji's use of his sword and inverted Spear of Heaven make quick work of Gojo, and really don't allow him to show off what he can tank without much damage. Even when you try to scale Gojo's physical durability to Ghetto, you get a similar outcome due to Ghetto being 3-shot by a Toji who is not trying to kill him. The same goes for Gojo's physical strength. Because he does not really fight hand to hand in this arc, we don't have a great gauge for his physical output in a fight. We know he can deal out damage to the cloning curse user, but that curse user doesn't scale anywhere relevant and makes his feat useless within this context. It's not all bad news though, because as we know, where Gojo lacks in physical strength feats, he makes up for in his hacks and curse techniques. Typically, when one discusses Gojo's hacks, there is a laundry list of abilities you need to go over, with all of them being extremely difficult to deal with in a fight. But when it comes to pre-awakened Gojo, he's actually much less versatile than one might think. For one, his Infinity is something that he must intentionally activate, meaning that Gojo can actually be caught off guard and damaged if he does not intentionally place his barrier up for defense. Don't get me wrong, there still isn't any conventional attack in the JJK verse that can get past Gojo's Infinity once it's up. However, unlike his adult counterpart, he is susceptible to things like being blitzed and tricked into lowering his guard. On top of this, consistent activation of his Infinity can tire him out. However, based on Gojo and Ghetto's dialogue, it's possible that he can keep up Infinity for several days straight without needing to take it down once. On top of this, Gojo is able to use Curse Technique Amplification Blue, the main offensive ability of this era of Gojo. Generally speaking, this technique is featless due to a lack of landing on opponents. However, the implication given by Toji is that it would do damage to him if he was caught off guard. In terms of destructive capacity, we do know that it can't deal extensive damage to an on-guard Toji, considering the fact that he scales with the attack potency of Red, which is revealed in chapter 84 to have double the cursed energy output of Blue. Luckily for Gojo, the main purpose of Blue is not to simply damage his opponent via raw force. As explained in chapter 69 and demonstrated in chapter 52, Blue essentially creates a magnetic effect in space which will attract objects to that attack and deal damage with the vacuum created. The problem with Blue for this Gojo is that it makes him tired. As he explains in the same chapter, Blue is very difficult for him to use, and manipulating the cursed energy accurately exhaust him quickly, making him very prone to fatigue. Once again, he does show the ability to still activate his techniques in spite of being fatigued, but continuous exhaustion would definitely negatively impact the accuracy and potency of his techniques and physical abilities as shown in his fight with Toji. Now, aside from his hacks that stem from the Limitless, Gojo also is in possession of the Sixth Size, which gives him enhanced perception, as well as a baseline understanding of techniques that are displayed in front of him. We don't know exactly how much Gojo was able to glean based off of a single glance, but as shown in chapter 69, he's able to get a grasp on more nuanced techniques pretty easily, which is useful in fights against opponents he knows nothing about. One of the lower tier hacks that he possesses is the ability to mitigate damage via cursed energy reinforcement, but it is important to note that what he's doing is not healing, but merely stopping non-lethal blows from causing him further issue within a battle. Up to this point, these are all of the unique hacks and abilities that Gojo possesses. We know that pre-awakening Gojo does not have access to red, he does not have access to purple, he doesn't have access to reverse curse technique, and he cannot use a domain expansion. All of these are abilities that he mentions or displays post-awakening, meaning that these are not techniques or abilities that Gojo will be using in today's versus battle. With Gojo scaling being done, it's time to see how Jogo stacks up. In stark comparison to Teen Gojo, Jogo has an abundance of physical feats due to his time in the series and just general style of fighting. For starters, Jogo actually has some pretty decent durability feats, showing the ability to outright tank several attacks from Gojo without his body becoming misshapen or even being torn apart. He does take damage from these attacks, but it is important to note that his physical composition remains mostly the same. On top of this, Jogo takes a point-blank curse technique reversal red and is not only able to survive but respond immediately with his flame curse technique. Once again, it's not like Jogo shows no signs of damage, however this feat is ridiculously impressive because of the fact that its output is at least twice that of curse technique reversal blue. Jogo also displays some sort of durability in his fight with Sukuna, as he really only gets torn apart when Sukuna uses cleave or his fire-based curse technique. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Jogo can tank attacks from 15 Finger Sukuna because that is just blatantly not true, but it is important to note that Jogo can be hit repeatedly by characters of this vague top tier level without immediately dying. Now, there are two statements relevant to the overall assessment of Jogo's power that may correlate to his durability depending on your interpretation. One comes from Kenjaku in chapter 12, in which he states that Jogo is around 8 or 9 fingers of Sukuna's strength when being generous. Obviously, this means that he is slightly overestimating the strength of Jogo here. However, the sentiment is that Jogo should be in this range. This statement is also somewhat substantiated by the fact that Gojo says in chapter 14 that he is stronger than the current Sukuna. Current at the time referring to 3 fingers of Ryomen Sukuna. Even if you are extremely conservative with your estimates, this would mean that Jogo should be around 4-finger Sukuna level, with anything higher being a bit more ambiguous. We know that 2-finger Sukuna far outclasses a special grade finger bearer, and 3-finger Sukuna is even more powerful than that. Jogo possibly being a level or multiple levels higher than that does imply that his durability should be able to keep up with his physical output. Even if you want to argue that for some reason these statements don't have to correlate to all of his stats directly and merely mean that he would win against characters of 3-finger Sukuna's caliber, that is important because this means that it gives us a very solid baseline for his speed and attack potency. You see, Jogo isn't the only character that is compared to 3-finger Sukuna. We actually have statements from Megami that place Toji's speed at 3-finger level. In fact, in chapter 111, Megami speculates that Toji may even be faster than 3-finger Sukuna. However, this statement is recontextualized 2 chapters later, as he then comes to the conclusion that Sukuna and Toji are closer to rivals in speed at this point. This creates a direct scale for us, not only to Toji, but as you'll see later in the video, Gojo himself. In any case, all the information we need is that Toji scales relative to 3-finger Sukuna speed-wise, and we've already determined via multiple reliable sources that Jogo scales above this 3-finger Sukuna and should be able to beat opponents on his level, which means that at bare minimum, he should be able to land blows on his opponents and not get blitzed. This places Jogo on the scale somewhat like this: Toji relative to 3-finger Sukuna, with Jogo being at bare minimum equal, although it's likely that he's faster than even that. I've seen refutations to this argument range from it being absurd to say that Jogo is faster than Toji, to mentioning the fact that Toji outscales Dagon by such a ridiculous degree that Jogo can't possibly compare. And for the first point, arguments based on calling a line of scaling absurd with no evidence aren't even worth debunking. And for the second argument, it's fine for Toji to massively outscale Dagon because Jogo does as well. In fact, right after Naobito and Nanami escape from Dagon's domain, they conclude from Jogo's mere presence that he is on a completely different level from Dagon, so there is no consistency issue with asserting Jogo over Toji speed-wise. It's also implied in the supplementary info of Chapter 51 that while Jogo has less durability than Hanami, he is significantly faster. If you want to take this with a grain of salt because Jogo is stating this himself, that's fine, as well as it not being that insane of a statement for his scaling, but it does have relevance in the speed section, so I thought I'd mention it before moving on to the next topic. Now, in terms of attack potency, Jogo doesn't really have shit without his fire curse technique, and while I typically like to segment a character's hacks and normal combat stats, I'm going to lump them in together with Jogo because his hacks is so basic and integral to his attack power that it's basically irrelevant to talk about them separately. He essentially just makes a bunch of fire and has some like low form of rock manipulation. With this, he's able to casually incapacitate Nanami, Maki, and Naobito. Now, I know it's a meme to clown on Jogo for not killing them with his attacks, however, due to him having way better AP feats in the manga and really casually attacking these characters, I don't see it as an anti-feat for him in any way. It's simply in character for Jogo to dismiss humans as insignificant, so I can very easily see him trying to not exert himself in any meaningful capacity. For the same reasons I laid out in the speed assessment of Jogo, he should very blatantly scale higher than Three Finger Sukuna in terms of AP. This Sukuna can one-shot domain Mahito using his curse technique, and this Mahito was able to take a combined barrage from Yuji and Nanami without his body deforming too much, although, as he stated, he was getting pretty close to death. Jogo also should be able to overcome Hanami's durability with his attacks, as he is determined to be stronger than him in the supplementary info of Chapter 51 that I mentioned earlier. This is impressive in and of itself because Hanami could survive 5 separate hits from Black Flash Yuji and Todo's playful Cloud Strike. Jogo gets really impressive though when you look at his maximum technique and domain expansion. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to scale Jogo's domain expansion attacks to vaguely higher than his maximum technique potency because domains are considered higher on the totem pole of cursed energy mastery and refinement. With maximum meteor, Jogo believes that even Sukuna would have taken damage from such an attack, and it is confirmed by Sukuna with the qualifying statement, if it hit. Meaning, the only thing stopping Jogo from really inflicting damage on Sukuna here was the speed of the attack. Obviously, speed would not be an issue when domain expansions are involved, so using maximum meteor as a measuring stick for his output within domain seems pretty logical to me. With that being said, both combatants have been scaled, and it's time to determine who would win based off of this scaling. The outcome of this match may be clear to some of you who are following the through line of both Gojo and Jogo scaling, but let's make a quick comparison of their combat ability. In terms of attack potency, Jogo displays massively better feats in this Gojo. Not only does maximum meteor and casual volcano attacks from Jogo demonstrate more destruction than any of Gojo's feats with blue, but he also has attacks that are confirmed to be able to hurt 15 Finger Sukuna outright. The same Sukuna, mind you, who blocked several attacks from Maharaga without so much as a scratch. Gojo, by comparison, in this department is pretty lackluster. In terms of durability, Jogo not only has higher stats than Gojo, but he also has durability feats that far outclass Teen Gojo's demonstrated attack potency, meaning that realistically he will not take substantial damage in their fights. Not only that, but Gojo's lack of durability feats means that you can argue that if any of Jogo's attacks hit, the fight ends here. This isn't to say that Gojo literally possesses no durability at this time, but it's making note of the fact that there is no concrete way to determine how much punishment he can take pre-awakening. When speed is added to the equation, Jogo shows the superiority once again, scaling above Toji in speed. Even when you are being charitable to Gojo, you can only really argue that Gojo and Toji are relative to one another, with Jogo being vaguely above that. Now, in terms of hacks, I definitely say Gojo has the advantage base to base. The fact of the matter is that Gojo cannot be touched by Jogo's normal attacks, and also has abilities like Blue, which can help lure Jogo out to be attacked, as well as in certain scenarios possibly being able to remove limbs, although Jogo would be able to heal from them pretty easily. The issue comes with Jogo's domain expansion. As we know, Jogo's sure hit domain can even bypass infinity. This is confirmed by Gojo himself in chapter 15 of the manga. And this also means that if at any point in the battle Jogo uses domain expansion, he will have the ability to hit Gojo with an onslaught of attacks that can't miss. What if Gojo just blocks it like he did in Jogo's domain before he opened his own? Well, to answer this question, we know that this Gojo is significantly more powerful than he was when he was a teenager. So if you were going to assert that he can simply block this with his curse energy or enhance durability, you would have to show feats that support this. Feats which Teen Gojo does not possess. Meaning that once Jogo opens a domain, Gojo gets one shot and the fight concludes. Simply put, Gojo has no real win con here. He's not fast enough to blitz Jogo or even hit him all that consistently. His attacks are too weak to do any lasting damage, and he has absolutely no defense against domain expansion, leaving him vulnerable to attack. The fight would just be Jogo attacking Gojo numerous times until Gojo explains the function of infinity as he does in character. As soon as Jogo realizes his normal attacks won't land, he'll simply open his domain and turn Gojo to ash, finishing the fight. If you argue that Gojo acts out of character in this fight and doesn't explain his technique like he's consistently shown to do, then in turn I just argue that Jogo out of character opens his domain as soon as he's within range and kills Gojo. Either way, Jogo wins this fight with very little real difficulty. If you want to see more versus battles like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment what matchups you'd like to see down below. And if you want to see my thoughts on this matchup here, click to get my thoughts on the matter. As shown in his comment emoji. What?